Okay, so I already recorded this, but it didn't save. So, okay, so I already recorded this, but it didn't save. So we're gonna tell the story again. Okay, Richard Alpert, who later became known as Ram Dass, he was a professor of psychology at Harvard, and this was back in the 60s, I believe. And Timothy Leary was another professor of psychology at Harvard, and Timothy Leary was given psilocybin, which is the psychoactive compound of magic mushrooms. He was given psilocybin, and he took it, and he was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I have to spread this to everyone, including Richard Alpert. So he gave it to Richard Alpert, and Richard Alpert took it and had a good experience in this psychedelic state of like feeling one with God and the universe, and started professing to his students that everyone should drop out of school and everyone should take this drug because if you do, it'll end all war. And you know, all of the just like free love kind of stuff that came with that beatnik and hippie era back then. Well, of course, Richard Alpert got fired, and a lot of flack in the media saying that, you know, this drug is going to ruin lives, etc., even though Richard Alpert was saying that it would save lives. But it's a drug, right? So he was obsessed with it. He became obsessed with psilocybin, because he would experience these really high states where he felt really at peace and this sense of euphoria and etc. But he would always come back down to reality, and that really hurt him. He, you know, it's like going and climbing a mountain and seeing the most beautiful view, but then having to come back down to reality and go to your 9-to-5 job. You're like, why can't I just climb this mountain every day or live up here? So what he ended up doing was he tried so hard to stay in that state, to the point where he would take it every day, as often as he needed to. One time he locked himself in his house with some friends who were also wanting to do it and stay in those states, and he is like, okay, I'm going to take it for 2 weeks straight. Surely I'll not come down back to reality if I'm in this state for 2 weeks. Well, he did come back down to reality, and this plagued him. He was like, what is this stuff? Why does it give us such this sense of peace and euphoria? Which not everyone experiences that, but that is why it's used at end-of-life transitions for some. In some states, you can use it as an end-of-life calming, because it can have this sense of peace for you. But anyway, so he then is like, okay, I'm going to go on a quest. I'm going to take this bottle of psilocybin pills, and I'm going to travel a world to try to find someone that knows what this stuff is and how I can stay in this state forever. And so he takes it and he goes traveling. And somewhere along the way of his travels, he's asking people, you know, what is this? Do you know what this is? He's not getting any answers. And somewhere along the way of his travels, he forgets his quest. And he finds himself in India, and he's following this monk. And the monk knows a lot. The monk knows all, okay? Knows a lot. And if you ever travel to India and meet some monks of your own, you will know. And so he's been following this monk for a few months now. He's actually been falling under, like doing what the monk is doing, like following the monk, and finding his own sense of peace, all the while forgetting about what he was originally doing. He just kind of got lost in this quest, and he found his own other sense of peace, which was, you know, probably a blessing for him. for Richard Alpert. But then one night he falls asleep and he wakes up in the morning early and he has this epiphany. Oh my God, the psilocybin. The monk will know. The monk knows everything. You know, the monk he has answers to all kinds of Richard's questions about life and you know, conflict and the human condition. So he's like, the monk would know what psilocybin is and how to stay in that state. So he goes to the monk. Well, actually, sorry. He wakes up, he has this realization, and then one of the helpers of the monk actually go to Richard Alpert first, knock on his door, and say, the monk needs to see you right away. And Richard is saying, oh, great, I need to see the monk, this is perfect. So he grabs his bottle of psilocybin and he goes to the monk, and the monk says, give me the medicine. And Richard Alpert is like, medicine? Like, Advil? Do you have a headache? I don't have any medicine. Are you okay? And the monk says, the stuff that gives you power. So remember that. He said, the stuff that gives you power. And Richard Alpert is like, oh, he must be talking about the psilocybin. Okay. So he takes his bottle out, he opens it, he takes a pill, and he puts it into the monk's hand. The monk is still holding out his hand, as if to say, more. So Richard goes, okay, let me give you another one. I don't know if the monk's ever done this before, but okay. The monk is still holding out his hand. Richard gives him another. The monk is still holding out his hand. Richard ends up pouring most of that bottle into the monk's hand. This is more than Richard has ever taken alone in one dose. And Richard has been, for months and months, he was trying to take as much as he can for as long as he could to stay in that state. And he has just poured more psilocybin than he has even taken into this tiny little monk's hands. So, what does the monk do? He takes it all. Just throws it back. And Richard then starts freaking out. He's like, oh my God, I just killed the monk. He's going to overdose. I'm going to have to take him to the hospital. He's going to have a psychotic break. Something is going to happen. So he is watching the monk like a hawk the whole day. And these states last for about 9 hours, like on a significant dose. So, you know, I think Richard was thinking that the state might last for a while. So he's watching for hours and hours, trying to make sure that he is safe and okay. But he's convinced that something bad is going to happen. Well, nothing happens. And the monk does what the monk does, which is sits and meditates all day. So he's sitting and he meditates. And the only thing that the monk does the whole day to Richard Alpert is he's sitting, closes his eyes, and he looks at Richard, and he just gives him a wink, and then goes back to meditating. So the point of the story is, well, one, the monk referred to psilocybin as the stuff that gives you power. Okay. But you will always come back down to reality. Now, the monk took more psilocybin, more power, than Richard had ever taken in his months and months of exploring this drug. Yet, whereas Richard would go to these extreme states and come back down and be really affected by the drug, the monk wasn't. The monk was not affected by the drug. What does that tell you? Normally, by now, I would be asking you guys questions. But what that tells you is that what do monks do all day? They meditate. They practice mindfulness, which is power of the mind in and of itself. So this drug, Richard was using to find these states of peacefulness and tranquility and a sense of love, etc. When all along, meditation and mindfulness is the stuff that could give it to him. Now, I want you to also consider, remember your synapses, okay? Repetition is what strengthens them. So Richard was taking this drug. It was showing him what he was capable of experiencing on his own, because it opened up his mind, and then wherever his thoughts went it was easily achieving these states. But he always came back down to reality and away from those states. So he was experiencing this, and then he was coming back, and he couldn't handle that. And remember that this drug allows you to establish new connections, but then you're going to come back to reality in your own thought patterns because you have to strengthen those. So power as in showing you what you're capable of, but it doesn't do the work for you. So Richard then became a monk, and then known as Ram Dass, and he meditated every day, and he then learned how to achieve those states long term with his own intention and not some substance, on his own. And that is really the key here with this story. So why is Miss Olson telling you all of this? Well, drugs offer us a way to alter our consciousness. And on the extreme side, we might rely on them to alter our consciousness, but then it's not permanent. You can't escape forever, if escape is your goal. You can't change it forever with these substances. They're temporary. They never last. And, we have these stimulants and depressants and opioids that we use to try to cope with pain. Okay, and we find that they have a lot more dangers. They have a lot of danger that comes with them, a lot of risks. Okay, well, and then we had banned hallucinogens, and now we're starting to use hallucinogens, and we can see that they're actually a lot more effective at treating the things like depression, anxiety, and all that stuff that we used to use and still use opioids and depressants and stimulants to cope with. And now we're like, oh, well, hallucinogens are the better drug category that can help treat these things. And absolutely, they can be effective in that way. But remember, no drug, no substance is ever intended for long term. And so then we get the story of Ram Dass, which shows us that the drug itself is not the answer if your intention is to alter your consciousness, if your intention is to heal, if your intention is to change your mind in some way, your pattern, your thought patterns. The drug itself is not the answer. You are. You are, and your choices. And your choices come from the other ways that alter your consciousness, that create new neural connections and strengthen those new synapses. And what are those? Those are all the things that I've introduced you to on Fridays, right? It's meditation, it's mindfulness, it's gratitude, journaling, it's anything. There's so many, right? There's yoga, it's spending time with loved ones, it's writing, it's drawing. It's all of the things that bring you back to yourself and process and the meditation specifically can grow your brain really efficiently and alter certain areas of your brain that you would see with certain psychedelic substances. So that is the story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about it, Miss Olson is not telling you to do drugs, okay? I am simply expressing to you the reality and of what exists, and that